Folk Studio 451 is proud to present Pioneer History of Orleans County, New York by Arad Thomas, edited and annotated by A. Burris. Chapter 5. The Log House. The log house, constructed and used by the first settlers of western New York, is now an institution belonging to a generation gone by. No new log houses are being built, and the few old ones that remain will soon be destroyed by the relentless tooth of time. Of those who were their builders and occupants, soon, no one will be left to tell their story. The most primitive log house to which we refer was rather a rough-looking edifice, usually 12 or 15 feet by 15 or 20 feet square. It was made of logs of almost any kind of uniform-sized timber nearest at hand. These were used with the bark on by rolling one log upon another horizontally, notching the corners to make them lie close together, and then built up to the height wanted for the outer walls of the house. An opening in one side was left for a door and commonly another for a window. Poles were laid across the walls for a bedchamber floor to rest on, to be reached by a movable ladder. A ridge pole and rafters supported a roof which was made of oak or hemlock splints or elm bark. Bark for roofs was peeled in June in strips about 4 feet long and laid upon the rafters in courses, held to the rafters by heavy poles laid transversely and bound by strips of bark. An opening in the roof at one end was left for the escape of smoke from the fire, which was built upon the ground under the opening. The remainder of the ground enclosed was covered with a floor of basswood logs, split or hewed to a flat surface. The crevices between the logs were filled, or chinked as they called it, by putting in splints in large openings and plastering with clay inside and out. When a sash, lighted with glass, could not be procured for use in the window, oiled paper was sometimes substituted for the glass. In extreme cases, the door was made of splints hewed flat and thin, but ordinarily it was made of sawed boards, hung upon wooden hinges and fastened with a wooden latch. The latch was raised by a string that was put through a hole to lift it from the outside. Hence, to say of a householder, his latch string was always out, was equivalent to declaring his generous spirit in opening his house to whoever applied for hospitality. Now, with the latch complete, the carpenter and joiner work on the house was done. Masons, painters, glaziers, and all other house builders had nothing to do here. The owner was his own architect, and commonly the house was put up at a gathering of all settlers in the neighborhood, gratis. We read that Solomon's temple rose without the sound of a hammer. In that respect, the temple has no advantage over these early homes of the settlers of Orleans County. There was no hammering here, for there were no nails to be driven. Sturdy blows with the axe did the business, and everything was fastened with wooden pins or withies. If time and means permitted, and the owner wished to indulge in the luxury of a chimney, he was gratified by building a portion of an end wall with stone. The stone portion of the wall was built several feet high and laid in clay mortar, and then the rest of the end wall was completed with logs in the usual way. A high crossbeam or mantel was put in. On this, a superstructure of sticks was laid in a square. Layer upon layer of sticks was added until the structure was higher than the roof. Then, as with the walls of the house, the walls of the structure were filled in with clay and called a stick chimney. This chimney and all the woodwork exposed to the fire, being well plastered with the clay mud, rendered the whole tolerably safe from the danger of burning. But this gave little encouragement to insurance companies, whose agents never ventured to take risks on such property. As wealth increased and a higher state of civilization and architectural development was introduced into the structure of log houses, stone chimneys were built from the ground up. About the time stone chimneys were first made, cellars under the log houses began to be constructed. These cellars were found to be exceedingly convenient as a depository safe from frost, adding much to the storage capacity of the house. The introduction of brick ovens marks an era that may be called modern compared with the primitive log house. These ovens, sometimes made far from the house and standing on a frame, were called Scotch ovens. When the family had become sufficiently affluent to afford it, sometimes a chamber floor of boards was laid upon the crossbeams overhead. A hole was left in the flooring, through which a person from below could mount a movable ladder into the chamber. Sometimes a wealthy settler who felt cribbed and confined too closely in a single room would build an addition to his log house. The new room was like the first, adjoined with a door between. The owner of such a double log house was looked upon with envy and admiration by all the neighboring housekeepers, who wondered what he could do with so much room. It would be a remarkable and exceptional case if the owner and his family did not put on some airs and go to keeping tavern. It would be several years before the general class of log householders got a barn. Until then, straw and fodder would be stacked outside for the livestock. If a shelter for them was desired, crotches of trees would be cut and then set in the ground for posts. Poles were laid across on these and then a pile of straw heaped on top. The result was a shed that was warm and dry. The log house, in general form and structure, was copied from the wigwam of the Six Nations of Indians. The bark roof was similar in both cases, but the Indians commonly built the walls of their wigwams of bark fastened to upright poles without a floor. Their fire was on the ground in the center, and the smoke rose without any chimney, finding its way through a hole left open in the center of the roof. In the log houses of the white men, fires were sometimes made by cutting a log 8 or 10 feet long from the largest tree they could find that would go through the door of the house without being split. This log was then run upon rollers endwise through the door and rolled to the back of the fireplace. A fire was built in the middle of the log in front, and fuel was applied to that spot until the fire consumed the center of the log. The ends would then be crowded together. This process continued until the whole log was burned. Sometimes such a backlog would last a week or 10 days, even in cold weather. The light from such a fire was commonly sufficient to illuminate the single apartment of the house at night. If more light was wanted, a dipped tallow candle was made by the mistress of the household, or a taper made of a dish of fat or grease with a rag stuck in it for a wick would answer the purpose.
Learn more about this series at pioneerhistory.us.